Now, the way that people looked at the universe has shifted. At one time, it was assumed that anything that doesn't exist on planet Earth is a celestial being, has some kind of spiritual nature, and maybe is intelligent in some sense. For example, the planets. The planets were observed to go around in circles. In our experience, we don't see anything moving around in circles, right? Things maybe move in a straight line and then come to stop. What would cause something to move around in a circle over and over and over and over again in a beautiful pattern? So it was concluded that these entities are intelligent and they're following God's will, and they're moving in a circle because a circle is a perfect and beautiful shape. And when Copernicus came up with a model that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the planets go around the sun, then people felt that somehow human beings were less significant than they were otherwise considered to be. Which, of course, is not the case because our significance was never based on whether or not things go around us or don't. At the time of Galileo, when telescopes were trained on the moon and other celestial bodies, the people realized that these things are rocks, basically, or gaseous entities. And therefore no more or no less intelligent and self-willed than the planet Earth. If you want to say that they are, then you have to make the same argument about the planet Earth. So people shifted towards a different view of humanity, and humanity's maybe significance in the world, although really, philosophically, there's no connection, but psychologically, that's what happened. And people began to perceive some kind of a new schism between religion and science, which of course is not the case. And in fact, there were many prominent Jewish scholars who, at the time, totally accepted Copernicus. It was more a problem, in a way, a political problem of the Catholic Church at the time. Basically, the conception of Aristotle, all the way up to Maimonides, and Maimonides ascribed to these as well, was that whatever was outside the Earth, and I'm generalizing a little bit, was heavenly, spiritual bodies. And the planets that we know today to be just rocks, basically, were heavenly bodies moving around in circles around the Earth. Now, everyone observes on Earth, when you move something, it moves in a straight line. Things don't naturally just tend by themselves to move in circles around and around and around continuously unless someone is pushing it, or unless it's an intelligent being that decided to go around in a circle. Their conception was that a circle is a perfect geometrical figure, and therefore all these entities move in circles around the Earth, and the reason that they're understanding enough of metaphysics to know that a circle is a perfect shape and desirous of moving in a circle is because they are spiritual entities and they are carrying out the will of the grounded being or the creator or whatever it be. When Galileo turned his telescope on the planets and was able to observe that they are rocks, they are matter, no more or less spiritual than the planet Earth, this was a fundamental revolution in our understanding of what the universe was. When Copernicus showed how much simpler it is to understand the universe if one thinks of all the planets and the Earth rotating around the sun, rather than everything rotating around the Earth, this was also a fundamental revolution in people's conceptions. Now, it is not true that there is any theological implication of necessity to any of these scientific theories. The fact that the Earth is not the center of the universe does not mean that there's no God or no creation or that humans are unimportant. However, because people erroneously attributed the theory that the Earth is the center of the universe and everything goes around it to religious sources, and it's not part of religion, because they attributed to that, when those theories were overturned, people then said, well, religion has been disproven. Mankind is not important. Mankind is just some kind of accidental figure in the universe. And I think it's important, therefore, to be more minimalist, not to look at scripture, texts, and to say, well, this is totally meant literally, and this is what it means, and to project your own understandings into what the text says, because you're probably misleading yourself and others. And there's also a danger in that, because you may be proven wrong, and then you have shaken someone else's faith in what is actually true, because you've given it a layer of untruth. And again, of course, what happened was that people said, wow, this universe is a mechanistic one. It's a naturalistic one. It's not spiritual entities moving in perfect circles because they are the perfect geometrical shape. But this beautiful geometrical shape comes out because of beautiful equations, which have these tremendously aesthetic results. But it's some kind of a natural law. One doesn't need necessarily to assume that there is something divine here. Newton himself was a believer, and he firmly believed that God had created the universe, and God had designed the laws of nature, and he saw no negative religious implications of any of this. What happened, though, was that people began to think of the universe more as a machine than as some kind of spiritual entity. Clockwork mechanisms, laws, simple laws really regulating what happens.
What about that religion and science say the opposite, about who orbits around whom? The sun orbits around the earth and the earth orbits around the sun.
The church at the time of Copernicus, to some degree, interfered with the development of science, and they burned Bruno at the stake, although historians now point out that it might be more a matter of politics, church politics and so on, than a question of heresy. And the same thing with Copernicus. It's not clear, again, what is the actions of individual priests, or like the witch hunts of Salem, or whatever. Is that really religion? That's not, we won't convince a Protestant that that's Protestant religion. You won't necessarily convince a Catholic. In fact, the Pope came out with a cleansing of Copernicus's name and Kepler and Galileo and so on. I think it was in 1992. They accepted Big Bang Theory. They don't have any problems anymore with science. They don't think that any of these people really were heretics, and they said that the church then made a mistake.
But don't we say that the sun moves around the earth?
No.
Doesn't it say that?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't say that the earth. There are things. For example, it says the sun rises. Do we believe that the sun rises? I mean, when people say that the sun rises, they don't necessarily mean the sun rises. When you look at the sun, it rises, but people know that the earth goes around. All the planets and the stars and the galaxies and everything is in relative motion to each other. Nobody is stationary. There's no one point that's stationary that you can say, this is stationary and this is moving around it. Anyone else can say, no, I am stationary and you are moving around me. There's no absolute space and absolute time and so on. Now, at one time it was thought that there was an absolute space and Earth is the center of the universe. And that, I don't think, was a religious conception. That was the conception of science or philosophy at the time. Then, at the time of Copernicus, it switched and they said, the sun is the center of the universe and everything goes around the sun. Then a little later they came to a different conception and said, no, the sun's not the center. Things are going around, and the Earth is going around the sun, but the sun is going around the galactic plane, the galaxies are going around something else, and the universe is expanding. There's all these different motions. But basically, the Earth is going around the sun. Then the general relativity perspective is that nothing is going around something else, and nothing is absolutely moving and everything else is stationary. Things are moving relative to each other. And there's a legitimate way to say that I'm standing still and everything is moving around me. The truth is that general relativity shows that one cannot make a statement in absolute about relative motion. You cannot say that the sun is standing still and the earth is going around it. And you cannot say the earth is standing still and the sun is going around it. They are in relative motion. So you could say the earth is standing still, everything's moving around it. Have you gained a greater understanding of the universe thereby? Well, it depends on what your conception is of the universe. Are the equations simpler that way? Certainly not. If you look at the equations of the orbits of the sun and the planets and the stars around you, very, very, very complicated equations. Very hard to get an understanding of an order to the universe that way. If you understand, if you just say, you know what, I'm going to take this perspective based on what I see these lights moving. These things are moving around me. The sun is rising. Those things are moving. That's legitimate. You can set up the equations, but the equations will simply be more complicated. The fact that they're more complicated doesn't mean that they're less true. Right? If you take the equations based on the sun being the center and things going around the sun, the equations are much simpler. Because equations are simpler doesn't mean that it's a more true perspective. They're different perspectives depending on where you're standing. Nothing is really standing still and everything moving around it. Things are moving around relative to each other. There are people who insist that when the Torah says something or other, it does in fact mean that the earth is standing still and things are going around it. You know, that's a legitimate interpretation of Torah. Scientifically, no one can disprove that. But I don't think it's scientifically useful. I don't think it's the correct understanding necessarily of Torah. It's an understanding.
God seeing and God saying and so on, and God stretching out his hand and taking the Jewish people out of Egypt. Nobody here, I imagine, really believes that it means that in a physical sense. And Maimonides and various other Jewish philosophers spoke at length about how one should interpret the creation story and the Garden of Eden story, not because it contradicted science, but because it was obvious to them that it didn't mean this, in a way, childish, simplistic, naive interpretation that people were giving. And just as in the time of Copernicus, people made assumptions, projected their own ideas of what Genesis meant, and that the Torah said that the sun is the center, the earth is the center of the universe, which it didn't really say, or it said it only in a poetic way. And then they created some kind of alleged controversy and contradiction between science and religion that didn't really exist, even according to the scientists who discovered the theory. So I would certainly not say that there is a contradiction, there is a problem, and there are many resolutions, but there really isn't a problem.